Have you ever felt at war with yourself? Part of you wants to change, to do more, to break free from inertia. But another part, the lazy one, the fearful one, the one that craves comfort, keeps pulling you back to where you started. You know that growth only comes through challenge, yet when the moment to act arrives, your brain still chooses the easy path. It's not because you lack willpower. It's because your brain hasn't yet learned how to crave challenge. The Stoics believe that no one becomes great in comfort. Strength isn't born in calm waters. It's forged in the moments you face your own resistance. The problem is, most of us spend our lives avoiding exactly that, avoiding the hard, the uncertain, the uncomfortable. And that avoidance quietly weakens us. We decay, not from failure, but from never daring to fail. This isn't a video about forcing yourself to try harder. It's about retraining your mind so your brain wants to do hard things. Because it's not that you lack energy, it's that you're burning the wrong fuel. You're running on worry, comparison, and fear of falling behind. And when that kind of fuel runs out, your willpower disappears with it. So before you learn how to make your brain crave difficulty, you have to start with something simpler, understanding where the real problem lies. Because if you're using the wrong fuel, it doesn't matter how hard you push, no road will ever take you far. Number 1, the problem. You're using the wrong fuel. Before we can train the mind to want to do hard things, we need to confront a truth that few people dare to face. Most of us completely misunderstand motivation. We talk endlessly about lacking motivation, yet we rarely stop to ask what motivation truly is. And when you don't understand the nature of a problem, every attempt to solve it is just a form of denial. You don't need more motivation. You need the right kind of motivation. We grow up in a world that teaches us motivation comes from rewards. Do well to be praised. Work hard to be recognized. Succeed in being admired. Every applause, every approving glance becomes the first spark that fuels the mind. We get so used to that feeling that we mistake it for real motivation. But look closer. Each time you achieve what you wanted, the compliment, the bonus, the recognition, how long does that rush last? Does it sustain you, or does it fade like a spark that burns out too fast, leaving you empty and craving another goal just to feel worthy again? That's the nature of extrinsic motivation. It's like fossil fuel. It burns hot and bright, but it runs out quickly. The more you rely on it, the more you have to burn to keep going. And like any borrowed source of energy, it makes you dependent. You need someone to see you, to praise you, to validate that you're on the right path. Without them, your fire goes out. The Stoics call this the most subtle form of slavery, the slavery of approval. When you let others decide when you're allowed to feel worthy, you're no longer free. Epictetus said, "You become what you give your attention to." Every time you live for feedback, you become a reflection of others, not yourself. The problem is that the human brain is wired for instant rewards. It doesn't care about meaning, it cares about dopamine. Each time you hit a goal, dopamine spikes, then it drops, and you fall into the void again. So we live like addicts, not addicted to success, but to the feeling of being validated. That's why you feel exhausted even when you're doing everything right. Imagine your mind as a machine running on the wrong power source. You keep feeding it short bursts of stimulation, quick hits of temporary fuel, and expect it to run smoothly. It can't. Every fast-burning fire burns out fast. Extrinsic motivation keeps you running only until the reward disappears, and when no one's watching, you stop. So, what kind of fuel can take you the distance? Stoicism offers another answer: energy that comes from within, intrinsic motivation. When you act not for a reward, but because the act itself feels right, you enter a completely different state. Effort stops feeling like a burden and becomes an expression of your nature. Think back to the last time you did something purely because you loved it. Not because someone told you to, not because there was a prize waiting, just because the process itself made you feel alive. Maybe it was writing a few lines late at night, cleaning out an old room, or mastering a move no one would ever see. Time vanished. You weren't chasing a reward, you were the act itself. That's intrinsic motivation, self-sustaining, independent, needing no applause and no proof. In Stoicism, this is autarkia, self-sufficiency, the state of being complete within your own actions. You work not for reward, but because the act embodies reason and virtue. Marcus Aurelius didn't write Meditations to be admired. He wrote it to stay awake to himself. For him, discipline was success. If you want your brain to crave hard things, you must change your relationship with effort. Stop treating hard work as punishment and start seeing it as training. Each time you choose the harder path over the easier one, you send your brain a signal. This is the reward. Do it long enough and your mind will begin to hunger for challenge, because it understands that only in difficulty do you truly feel alive. Start small. When you want to procrastinate, work for just 5 minutes. When you want to quit, pause, take a breath, and take one more step. Don't wait for inspiration. Let the smallest action be the first signal of real energy. Like a Stoic soldier, you don't need to shout to move forward. Just take one quiet, steady step and keep going. The modern world wants you to believe motivation is a feeling, but the Stoics knew feelings rise and fall. Discipline remains, feelings depend, discipline frees. When you replace borrowed motivation with inner energy, you stop searching for motivation altogether. You become motivated. And then one day, something shifts. You no longer have to push yourself to do the right thing. You start to want it. Your brain learns to love the process, to love the struggle, to love the tension of stretching beyond your limits. At that point, you stop asking, "How do I find motivation?" You simply act, because you've found the right kind of fuel, the kind that never runs out, because it comes from within. Number 2, the science behind limitless drive. And when you finally discover the right kind of fuel, something remarkable begins to happen. Your body stops resisting and starts craving the challenge. The mind, once an expert at finding excuses, becomes an ally. It no longer needs instant rewards because the process itself has become the reward. When you work from intrinsic motivation, your brain sets off a beautifully intricate chain reaction. Dopamine sparks focus and the joy of progress. Norepinephrine heightens alertness and energy. Acetylcholine sustains deep attention. That's the moment you feel yourself lock in, time fades, fatigue disappears, and you become one with the work. Go deeper, and the transformation continues. Endorphins make effort feel light. Serotonin keeps your mood balanced. Anandamide opens the door to creativity, and oxytocin nurtures connection, helping you flow effortlessly with others. In this state, work stops being a burden. It becomes a current. Every small step forward feels magnetic. This isn't motivation as you once knew it. It's a self-sustaining current flow, the state where difficulty becomes delight, where you no longer act because you have to, but because you want to. I once met a man who understood this perfectly. He was a creative designer in London, in love with art and the power of images to move people. But over time, the joy faded. His work became routine. His ideas were edited to fit someone else's vision. He felt drained. One morning, he quit. He took his old laptop, flew to Lisbon, and began working on projects he believed in: education, art, and sustainability. He worked harder than ever before, yet felt lighter. Every project was a new world. He learned, he experimented, he created without restraint. And then he realized what he'd been searching for wasn't the right job. It was the right state of being. Flow, where work stopped being duty and became a natural expression of joy. Science calls this the feedback loop between flow and intrinsic motivation. When you're interested, you enter flow more easily. When you're in flow, your interest deepens. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, the same one that kept Einstein endlessly curious, Marie Curie resilient amidst radiation and hope, and Michael Jordan obsessively honing his craft. They didn't need to be pushed. They were pulled by the fascination of the journey itself. And the foundation of that cycle rests on 5 pillars: curiosity, purpose, mastery, autonomy, and autotelicity, the core elements we'll explore next. The Stoics call this true freedom, the state where you act not from reward or fear, but from value. They believe discipline doesn't kill inspiration, it creates it. As Epictetus said, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. Everything meaningful takes time to ripen. Flow is no different. You can't force it. You can only prepare the ground for it by being more curious, more self-directed, more present. Once you understand this mechanism, hard work stops feeling like a sacrifice and starts feeling like a privilege. Every focused hour becomes a compound investment. Every act of persistence is a step deeper into your own untapped potential. Stop searching for motivation out there, ignite it in here. When you act from inner strength, your brain learns to love the process, to love the strain, to love the stretch of reaching beyond your limits. That's when difficulty becomes a natural part of the journey, and you realize infinite motivation isn't something you find, it's something you create in every action, every breath, every moment you live fully for what you believe in. Number 3, curiosity. Follow what pulls you in. When you start acting from inner strength, your brain learns to love the process, even the strain of pushing past your limits. But there will come a point when effort alone isn't enough, when discipline can no longer pull you forward, because there is something else, subtler, stronger, that can draw you into difficult work without force: curiosity. Curiosity is the source of all progress. It's not loud like passion, nor urgent like pressure, but it has a quiet pull that won't let you sit still. It's that itch in the brain that makes you ask, search, and reach for the unknown. When curiosity is activated, dopamine levels rise, and suddenly learning stops feeling like an obligation. It becomes a joy. Every new insight, every skill you try, every failure you analyze turns into a game for the mind. You no longer act because you have to. You act because you want to understand. And at that moment, the hard work stops being a burden. It becomes the reward. Think back to a small moment in your life, a time when you truly wanted to know something. Maybe when you tried to fix a line of code that wouldn't run, or wondered why your plant wilted even though you watered it daily. You sat down, searched, tweaked, read more, tried again. Time disappeared. No one had to remind you or cheer you on. That's the state of a learning addict, when the reward isn't in the outcome, but in the act of discovery itself. Curiosity is the antidote to stagnation. When you feel stuck, it's rarely because the work is too hard. It's because you've stopped asking questions. When you lose your spark, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've forgotten the joy of wondering. A mind unfed by questions is slowly consumed by boredom. Like a flame deprived of air, it doesn't die from the wind. It dies from suffocation. So how do you rekindle that flame? Don't start with grand goals. Start with a small question, a single spark. What's interesting about this? Pick one angle you don't yet understand, one piece that intrigues you, one thing you'd like to test. When you learn something you can apply immediately and you see a tangible result, your brain rewards you with dopamine. You feel good, you feel energized, and that feeling pulls you to keep going. You've just triggered the intrinsic reward loop. Learn, apply, see results, and crave more learning. A young engineer once told me he nearly quit his job out of exhaustion. Everything felt heavy, repetitive, and pointless. Until one day he got curious about automating a boring task. Just one line of code. But when it worked, when the result appeared instantly, he felt a quiet thrill. He kept going, learning more, improving, expanding. Months later he realized he was working longer hours, with more focus, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He didn't need motivation anymore. He was living inside it. Curiosity transforms difficulty into exploration. It shifts your question from "how do I overcome this" to "what can I learn from this?" And that single shift changes everything. When your focus moves toward learning, fear dissolves, resistance fades. You move from enduring to experimenting. Your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a laboratory. The beauty of curiosity is that it turns even the smallest experiences into teachers. A criticism becomes data. A failure becomes a case study. Everything, good or bad, becomes material for understanding yourself and the world more deeply. When you look at life through the lens of curiosity, everything has meaning. Nothing is wasted. And if you ask, how long can curiosity keep me going? The answer is indefinitely. Because curiosity doesn't rely on external rewards. It feeds itself. Every time you learn something new, you add fuel to the next step of your journey. The more you learn, the more you want to learn. The more you understand, the more you realize how much is still unknown. And that feeling, that endless sense of wonder, is the most powerful engine the human mind has ever known. Number 4. Mastery. Progress is the real reward. Once curiosity pulls you onto a new path, another human instinct awakens, the desire to go deeper, to master what you've just discovered. That's when the journey stops being about exploration and becomes about refinement. You begin to realize that true joy doesn't come from knowing something new, but from mastering what you're learning. Every small step forward, Every subtle improvement, every time you do just a bit better than yesterday, it gives you an indescribable thrill, the excitement of progress. And then it hits you. This is the real reward for effort, the feeling of becoming better than you were before. Look at an athlete. After each victory, he doesn't rest. He returns to training, perfecting every movement, polishing every detail, because he knows victory doesn't make a winner. Training after victory does. The same goes for you. If you rely only on bursts of inspiration, you'll fall apart the moment challenges appear. But if you learn to enjoy the process of improvement, the small steps, the slow growth, you'll discover something powerful. Hard work becomes addictive. Your brain releases dopamine. You want to return, to repeat, to refine. And just like that, you're training yourself to love difficulty, not because you have to, but because you crave the satisfaction of seeing yourself improve. Mastery isn't a gift anyone gives you. It's the result of what the Stoics called ascesis, deliberate practice. It means stepping willingly into discomfort, not avoiding clumsiness, not fearing mistakes, because you understand that each mistake lays a brick in the foundation of skill. The one who refuses to be awkward will never be great. But the one who embraces awkwardness gains a power others can only envy, the power of progress. This feeling is so strong that it rewires your brain. Every time you reach a new edge of your ability, your brain rewards you with a dose of dopamine, its way of saying, do that again. This is worth it. And so you return, you repeat, you adjust, you improve, until eventually the hard work itself becomes pleasure. The brain that once feared failure now hungers for challenge. You no longer need motivation. Progress is the motivation. Remember, the Stoics never sought an easy life. They sought a disciplined one. Epictetus said, "Difficulties show a person's character." Hardship doesn't come to defeat you, it comes to reveal you. It exposes your weaknesses, maps where you need training, and offers you the chance to grow stronger. When you view every challenge as an exercise, every failure becomes data, every bit of progress becomes fuel. And once you learn to take joy in improvement, you've unlocked the secret to making difficulty a natural part of life. Someone once asked, "Why don't I feel joy in what I do?" The answer, they're chasing outcomes. Results are the finish line. Progress is the path. When you stare only at the destination, every step feels heavy. But when you learn to love the steps themselves, to take pride in being better than yesterday, you free yourself from pressure. You turn exhaustion into excitement. And the paradox is this: the moment you stop chasing instant happiness, joy finds you, the quiet joy of self-mastery. Think back to the last time you learned a new skill, playing guitar, running, writing, or cooking. At first it felt awkward. Then slowly everything started to click. You felt a spark, that subtle thrill of getting better. That's the feeling you must recreate every day, in your work, your effort, your discipline. When progress becomes a habit, you no longer need someone to push you. Your mind and body will seek out challenge, as if that's where they truly belong. Don't waste your life doing things that keep you standing still. Do the things that upgrade you. Every time you learn something new, however small, you're training your brain to crave greater challenges. And every time you face something hard, you're teaching yourself how to live freely, because real freedom belongs to those who master themselves, who don't fear difficulty and don't run from it. If you've ever had that moment when something that once confused you suddenly feels easy, when you look back and realize you've changed, hold on to it. And if you'd like, write it down somewhere, maybe in the comments below, as a reminder to yourself. Because somewhere out there, on a quiet night, someone might be reading these same words, and in your story, they might find their own reason to begin. Number 5. Autotelicity, when work becomes play. Have you ever wondered why you can spend hours scrolling through social media but struggle to stay focused for just 10 minutes of work? Why can you joyfully play a game all night but find completing a small task feels like climbing a mountain? We don't actually hate work, we just haven't learned how to love what we do. What we all crave isn't endless rest. It's to do something that makes us feel alive. We want to wake up feeling excited. We want to look at what we're doing and feel that it matters. Yet instead of living in that current of purpose, most of us get trapped between two extremes, working ourselves to exhaustion, then escaping into distractions that make us forget the work itself. The result? The harder we work, the more disconnected we become from our own effort. The problem isn't the work, it's how we see it. We were taught that work is an obligation and play is a reward. But there's another way to live when the work itself is worth doing. When you don't need a reward beyond the act itself. When work stops being something you have to do and becomes something you want to do. The ancient Greeks had a word for this state, autotelicity. Auto means self, telos means purpose. It means the purpose is within the act itself. You've seen people like this. When they work, they don't need an audience. When they create, they don't need praise. They lose themselves in the act as time disappears. You'll find them everywhere. The chef who keeps adjusting the broth until the flavor feels just right. The mechanic carefully tuning each gear. The artist quietly perfecting a painting no one commissioned. They don't work for recognition. They work because not working feels wrong. How can they do that? Because they understand something most of us miss. Instead of asking, "What do I love?" they ask, "What am I good at?" Liking is emotional, it comes and goes. But being good at something has roots. When you do what aligns with your natural strengths, you're more likely to enter flow, that state of total absorption where everything clicks and effort feels effortless. Once you experience flow, you start to love the work without realizing it. Not because the work has changed, but because you have changed your relationship with it. Think back to the last time you lost track of time. Maybe you were cleaning your room, cooking a meal, or editing a video until it finally looked right. In that moment, you weren't thinking about results. You were living in the process. That's autotelicity, when the act itself is joy, when work and play merge into one. And when that happens, you don't need to push yourself to work. Your brain wants to work. So how do you cultivate that state? Start small. Before asking, "How do I find more motivation?" ask, "Am I working within my strengths?" If not, make a small adjustment. Find ways to bring your strengths closer to your work. If you're good at writing, find ways to write in whatever you do. If you're good at connecting with people, use that strength to improve your surroundings. When you work from your strengths, flow finds its way to you. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." The greatest freedom is when you no longer need rewards to act. When you work for the sake of mastery, When you take joy in refining the smallest details, you free yourself from the trap of chasing outcomes. You stop counting hours. You stop comparing. You stop competing. You just do because you love the feeling of being fully present in what you're doing. And perhaps that's the simplest way to turn hard work into joy. You don't need to force yourself to love your job. You don't need motivational slogans. You just need to enter it with curiosity, with the desire to do it a little better each day. When you're focused enough, committed enough, joy arises naturally, because in the end, what the brain truly craves isn't rest, it's meaning. And meaning isn't somewhere out there. It's right here, in every act done with attention, in every moment you lose yourself because you're fully alive in your work. When that happens, you no longer need a reward. The work itself is the reward. Number 6, purpose. Do it for something bigger. If work is supposed to be the reward, then why do we sometimes still feel empty? Why does every effort, no matter how good, feel like it never quite touches something truly deep? We grow tired, not because we work too much, but because we don't know why we work. Nothing drains the mind faster than waking up every morning, unsure of whether what you do leaves any trace on the world. Without a reason larger than yourself, every effort becomes fragile. That's the quiet illness of the modern age. We throw ourselves into work, yet it feels like we're just spinning inside a machine. Each small task seems disconnected from the whole, and nothing ties them together. That's when the brain begins to resist. It asks, why, and finds no answer. Without a why, the body tires. Without a why, the mind dulls. Without a why, they will slowly die. Purpose is the answer to that emptiness. It's not a grand, abstract dream. It's the deep sense that your work contributes to something greater than yourself. When you have purpose, difficulty stops being the enemy. It becomes a reminder, this is worth it, because you understand the meaning behind your effort. Every drop of sweat, every small setback becomes part of something far more significant than you imagined. The brain behaves differently when guided by purpose. It releases serotonin, giving you steadiness and clarity. It releases oxytocin, deepening your sense of connection to others, to your work, to the path you're walking. With purpose, you stop working for recognition and start working for what deserves to be completed. That's when the brain stops avoiding difficulty. It begins to crave it because it knows that behind every hard task lies a step closer to what truly matters. But purpose isn't something anyone can hand you. It doesn't come from a title or money or applause. It begins when you pause and ask yourself, what am I doing this for? If your answer feels vague, rewrite it. Make it sharp. Make it short enough to remember and strong enough to believe in. It could be to help people understand themselves so they can live freer, or to inspire someone to begin again. That's not a slogan, that's a compass. From there, even the smallest actions gain direction. When you reply to an email, you're not just typing, you're honoring the professionalism of someone keeping a promise to their ideals. When you learn a new skill, you're not just building capacity, you're expanding your ability to serve what you believe in. Purpose doesn't turn you into someone else. It simply makes you more clearly yourself. There's an old story about 3 bricklayers. When asked what they were doing, the first said, "I'm laying bricks." The second replied, "I'm building a wall." But the third smiled and said, I'm building a cathedral. Same work, 3 perspectives. Only the third could work a lifetime without growing weary, because he wasn't just stacking bricks. He was raising something that touched the sky. That's what purpose does. It doesn't make work easier, it makes it worth it. When you work for something larger than yourself, every challenge feels lighter, because it's no longer just yours to carry. Purpose turns work into a mission and struggle into a voluntary devotion. Look at your life today. How much of what you do is just because you have to, and how much feel like it contributes to something meaningful? If the answer makes you pause, don't be discouraged. That silence is a good sign. It's the beginning of awareness, the space where purpose starts to form. When you find something greater than yourself to serve, your brain changes. It no longer has to be forced into difficult work. It wants it. Because now, with every effort, you're not just moving closer to a goal, you're becoming closer to the person you're meant to be. And that is the true power of purpose. It doesn't just help you survive the days, it gives you a reason to live them. Number 7, autonomy. Own the way you live and work. We live in an age where everyone is busy, yet very few are truly free. You might have a good job, a stable income, and all the signs of success, but if every day feels like you're being pulled by invisible strings, you're not really living, you're being lived through. Your mind is programmed to react to deadlines, messages, notifications, and the expectations of others. You become so conditioned to respond that you forget a simple truth. Your time and energy were yours to begin with. And when your brain gets used to reacting, it forgets how to initiate. It's not that you lack willpower, it's that you've lost ownership of it. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true strength begins when a person knows what is and isn't within their control. All suffering, they said, comes from trying to command what can't be commanded while neglecting the one thing that can, ourselves. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That's the essence of self-mastery. You can't choose the circumstances, but you can always choose your perspective, your response, and your next move. That's why the first step to making your brain want to do hard things isn't finding motivation, it's reclaiming your sense of agency. Even if your current job isn't ideal, try seeing it as part of a journey you chose. If you're in a temporary position, treat it as a stepping stone, not a prison. If you're learning a skill you don't love yet, see it as an investment in your future freedom. When you change how you look at something, you change your entire position within it. Work stops being what they gave you and becomes what you chose to use to move forward. That's perceptual autonomy, the freedom to define your own perspective. Once you have that, you don't have to wait for a different life to feel free. You're free inside the one you already have, because you no longer act out of fear, but out of choice. When your brain understands that you are choosing, it reacts differently. It starts releasing dopamine, not from external rewards, but from the inner sense of control. It's like playing a game you designed yourself. Every challenge, every small win, brings satisfaction. Work becomes the game you built, one where you're both the creator and the player. But autonomy isn't just a mindset shift, it's a practice. Dedicate at least one block of time each week to something you fully control, something that's entirely yours. It could be writing, learning, creating, or simply building a small skill. The scale doesn't matter, the feeling does. This space is mine. Each time you act from that space of autonomy, your brain strengthens its belief that you can steer your own direction. And that belief becomes a renewable source of energy. Think of someone quietly building their own life. No one knows their name. No one praises their work. Yet every day they sit down, writing a page, refining a skill, developing an idea. For them, discipline isn't punishment. It's the purest expression of freedom. They don't need a push because they're already pulled by their own will. That's when the brain stops fearing difficulty and starts craving it. Because each challenge becomes proof of identity. I am the one steering my life. So ask yourself, are you living like the driver or the passenger of someone else's train? Are your hands on the wheel, or have you let circumstances decide your route? Autonomy doesn't come from abandoning everything. It comes from deciding how you'll spend each minute of your one life. One focused hour for yourself, one self-directed project, one new way of seeing your work. Each is an act of reclaiming your freedom. When you live that way, hard work stops feeling like a burden. It becomes how you expand your territory of control. And step by step, effort by effort, you're not just finishing tasks, you're training your brain to hunger for challenge, to love growth, to live as the architect, not the passenger. When you take ownership of how you live and work, you'll never have to ask, how do I find motivation? Again, because your life itself becomes the motivation. And that brings us to the final lesson of today's journey. The path you and I have walked together through 7 principles for training the brain to crave hard things. These aren't just abstract ideas. They form a roadmap for a life lived with intention. To understand the real problem, choose the right fuel, nurture motivation, follow curiosity, find joy and progress, live for something larger than yourself, and finally, take ownership of how you live and work. But above all, this isn't a journey to become someone else. It's a journey to return to yourself, the version of you who once had passion, who once dared to begin, who once believed you could be more than this. In a world full of noise, you don't need to run faster. You just need to reach back and take hold of your own steering wheel again. Every difficult thing you face isn't a wall. It's a weight that strengthens the mind, a moment that hardens willpower until it grows stronger than fear. If today's message resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Leave a like, not as a click, but as a seed you plant in the world. A seed of awareness, discipline, and the courage to walk the hard road. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, where each video is a small step back toward your inner steadiness, subscribe. Not to follow another channel, but to remind yourself of something far greater, that you're choosing to live differently, with clarity, with calm, and with strength that grows deeper every single day.